So today I want to talk just a little bit about the underworld and like the various representations of the underworld based on like what belief system you're into, right? So I took a look at some of the major ones, and Mectucleccuhtli, right, who is the Aztec representation of the Lord of the underworld, Mechlin, and it's described as a place that, one, we know a little bit about it, but not a lot, right? From my research, it did have 9 very distinct realms, and everybody went to this place, independent of how you were morally in life, as far as if I'm reading it properly. Now there are 9 distinct levels, and the journey from the first level to the 9th level is said to be like exceptionally difficult, and it takes like 4 years. But there is a helper there who will help guide you. It's Shulut. And the dead have to pass through many challenges, such as a mountain range where the mountains are crashing into each other, a field that has all these flesh scraping knives, and a river of blood lined by these fearsome jaguars. So you can tell, you're going to need all the help that you can get here in the Aztec cosmology of where you go in the underworld. Probably most famous, at least in the West, is obviously Hades, right? And this is the earliest idea of Greek myth. And the idea said that in the moment of death, your individual essence, your psyche, was separated from your corpse body and transported to the underworld. And early on, the Greeks kind of said everybody was placed and just grouped together in this somewhat shadowy, kind of murky after-world existence or after-life existence. It is described as sometimes being periphery or next to Earth, but most often associated with like the outer limits, like the space ocean, as they kind of saw through Oceanus. It is marked by like darkness and a lack of sunlight, and these are very common features. This is a very high contrast world when relative to obviously Earth, and then of course Mount Olympus, which was the ultimate shining kingdom. And we know a lot about Hades. We know some of the geography, right? We know about the rivers. We know the river Styx, what that's all about. We know about the Acheron River, or the River of Woe, right? We also know about the Elysian Fields, the place that you really want to be, the high rent district of Hades. So Hades wasn't all bad if you get into the Elysian Fields, right? Go figure. But we also know some of the creatures there. We know about the Cerberus dog, the Guardian, and this dog would kind of set the stage for all other hellhound representations. We know about Thanatos, who's another figure associated with death, but also Hypnos. And then we know about Tartarus, which is a specific place within Hades, right? This was like a dungeon place, where a place of torment. Even within that structure, even the Titans were imprisoned. Now, if we go over to, Kemetic, North African, Egyptian mythology, obviously we get to start hearing about Osiris, or Wasar as he should be called. And we know his story, where he was, I guess in his former life, as a living deity. He came to Earth. He was married to Isis, or Waset, right? Her Kemetic name. And he was spreading knowledge, right? He was a really righteous dude, taught us about agriculture and all that. He gets killed by his brother, becomes the first mummy, and he descends to the underworld. He is now the Lord. But in his realm, like, this is an important realm. This is the Duat, right? This is the place where all the dead eventually go to this place. But the thing about the Duat is it's not supposed to be your final resting place. This is only one step in the afterlife for the Kemetic people. Now, the Duat itself is represented in iconography as a 5-pointed star inside of a circle, meaning that it represented both the night and the day. And the concept of the Duat placed it as a place without either a day or night, but still marked days that were passage, right? There are some things that we know about the landscape. It has a geography that's not much different than the world that we would live in, which is kind of consistent with their beliefs. There were islands there were rivers, there were caves, there were mountains, there were fields. And this Duat had a specific, like, primal importance to ancient Kemet, because this is the place where all the souls were received for judgment. And again, this goes back to Ma'at, which is truth or justice or balance, however you conceive that. And it was known, like, once you got there, you had to be also escorted. So you were escorted by Anpu, or Anubis. He was your guide through there. And then you would have to stand before the ceremony of the weighing of the heart ceremony. So it's a terrifying moment. Either you're going to go on to your next stage, your next place in your evolution, or I believe you go to those demons if your heart doesn't weigh out properly. So this is a terrifying time, but hopefully it all turns out good. And it should be good for you if you live righteously and your heart is light. Right? Now, looking at the Norse representation of the same concept of the underworld, we come to finding Helheim, which is the Norse representation. And this is, of course, linked to the goddess who they would call Hela. She was known as the two-faced terror, and she was an ancient god of the dead who presides over this realm. Now, this is said in descriptions in their mythology to be a dark and hostile world, and she is a very kind of cruel mistress. The sacred number of this realm is 8 in the spectral 9 realms concepts of Norse mythology. And it's near the Niflheim and Svartalfheim, which is the place of the elves and the dwarves, these two, Niflheim and Svartalfheim. And this was a region for all the people who died of disease and old age and just natural causes without dying of something worthy. The underworld, of course, had Valhalla, which is just one of the cool places. Valhalla is also in the underworld, but you only got to Valhalla if you're a warrior and you died in battle. So this is very, very important stuff that you know how you're going to get into Valhalla. And there was another place for like the wise and also the scholarly, like the talented. So there were other places within the Norse realm that you could get to those places. Now, one of the geographies that we know about Hell was the Hell Gate, which is the final gate blocking Hela's great halls, right, where all the good stuff was at. And this was guarded by a great hound, again, Garmir. And again, a similar kind of story like to Cerberus and what his role was. And his only job was to protect that gate, to keep all the tormented undead from being able to either escape there and go pester the living, or to go on to the realms that they didn't belong to. Now, at the end of Ragnarok, at the end of times, this gate's going to be thrown open. And one of the things that will be released on mankind is this army of undead within. All the other people who just got to live there. It doesn't say where the Valhalla goes and fights you. But that's what's going on there. And one of the last of the realms that we'll look at is that of Ereshkigal. Now, Ereshkigal was in Mesopotamian or Sumerian mythology, Sumerian Akkadian mythology. She is described as the Lady of the Great Place, or the Abode of the Dead. And in the mythology, she's spoken up as very high, very powerful. She's a great queen of earth. She was the goddess of Kur, which was the name of their underworld land, although it had another land. And it was seen as really one of the most establishing concepts of an underworld. This was a dark, dreary, cave-like location in the earth. And the inhabitants were said to live this kind of trans version of their life on earth, just far more boring. The food there was all drink was all dry like dust, but your family members could dedicate libations to you. So any sacred libations or ceremonies they did could grant you food, literally, and drink in this underworld. So it's very important to maintain good relationships with your people. And we see from this story, we get a good idea of kind of general idea what this realm is. We don't go much further. The only other stories we know is that Inanna, of course, her arrogant self, descended into this underworld trying to take it over, only to be sent back home with her tail between her legs. But we see some consistencies in the idea of an afterlife or a place, and some of the differences whether you were going to be there forever or whether this was just a passing point. We see equal representations in the lords or masters being both male and female gender. But there's lots of other topics or ideas within the concepts of these underworlds that can tell us more about each of these civilizations, how we relate to them, and how they relate to themselves.